Hi everyone. In our previous session, we looked at how to upload the artifact manually to EBS, that is Elastic Beanstalk. And in this session, we will look at how to deploy the artifact through GitLab CI/CD. So what we're going to do is we will split this topic into two sessions. In the first session, we'll upload the file to S3 bucket. And in the next session, we will deploy the artifact to EBS. Okay, so I'm in my AWS management console. So in that, under services, we have something called storage. In that, we have S3. So what is S3? S3 is a simple storage service provided by AWS. You can, consider it like the other providers like Google Drive or Dropbox or even Microsoft OneDrive. So it's a storage service where we can upload files. Okay, we can store the files. Now, there are a few terms that S3 uses, like buckets. Now, buckets is something like packages, or you can call it as folders in your operating system. And all the files that you upload under buckets are called as objects. Okay, so what we are going to make use of this bucket. So what we'll do is we'll upload the artifact to our bucket, and from bucket then we'll move this to the EBS instance. So we cannot directly upload the file or deploy the artifact to the EBS. So we have to take this step, and this is the recommended or the steps that we normally follow. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to create a bucket first. So here we have an option to create bucket, and I'll call this as Spring REST bucket, REST service bucket. And the region is going to be US East 1. And I'll block all the public access. I don't want public access to this service, so I'll keep that as checked. And bucket versioning, I'll keep rest all the option as default, and then I'll create a bucket. So the bucket is created. So next what I'm going to do is I am going to go to my GitLab CI/CD. I'll log in as a team lead user. And under services, okay, under groups, I have a group created here, GitLab group. And in this, if you see here, there is an option of CI/CD, okay, under settings, and you have an option called variables. Now what these variables are like, you can have a project level variables, something like environment variables, okay? But if you keep something at the group level, then those variables are global. That means you can use those variables to all the projects within that group. So what I'm going to do is, instead of creating the variables at project level, okay, I'll be creating at the group level. So here I would say expand, and I'm going to add a variable. I'll tell this as S3 bucket. Okay, and the value is going to be the name of the service here. What is the name? Yeah, this one. This is my bucket, so that is going to be my bucket name. And add variable. Okay, so I have added a variable called S3 bucket. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a deploy stage to the GitLab CI. So here, next we have deploy, and in the deploy we'll create the stage here. So deploy and the stage is going to be deploy, this one. Okay, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an image. Now before we add an image here, the one that we have at the top is not going to help, because we are trying to push something to the AWS S3 service, right? So to interact with the AWS services, we want to use AWS CLI, a tool. So for that, we need to search for an image that has AWS CLIs installed in it. So if you go to the Docker Hub and search for AWS CLI, there is an image called, which you can use, AWS CLI. So we are going to make use of this. And basically, if you look at what is CLI, so if you look at this, it is an AWS command line interface through which you can interact, or you can say you can manage your AWS services. So using this, what we are going to do is we are going to connect to our S3 service. Okay. For that, now let's go back to our deploy, and here I'm going to name that as this. Perfect. Next, now if you look at the entry point, one thing that you need to look at here is, let's look at the tags. Okay, different tags that we have, and if let's look at the latest. Okay, so this is the entry point by default. Okay, so instead of we using this, we can use this, that's fine. Let's do that. Okay, let's keep the entry point as this. We don't want to override this. So let's see how the GitLab CI behaves when we have the default, whatever we have in the image. So next, what we're going to do is we are going to add the script. And the script that we are going to run is, we are going to run the AWS command. And this is going to be, first we'll configure the region, and the region that S3 bucket we have is, let's go to our services, and it is US East 1. So that is what we are going to set the region. Configure set region US East 1. And if you're not familiar with AWS CLI commands, you can also go to the to this command line interface documentation, and you can see that all the the commands that you can get familiar with the different commands and also different variables that we can use to configure or to manage the services. Okay, so the next what we are going to do is we have set the region. Next we are going to connect to the AWS. So AWS S3, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy, this is cp is the copy command, copy the file that is then the one that we have in our build here, the artifact that we created. That is what we want to copy it to the S3. Okay, so now before doing that, let's not use star here. Okay, if you look at here, we in the target folder there are there are two, but even though if we do a star, it's going to pick this. But instead of using star, it's better that we use the name of the artifact that gets generated, okay, rather than using star. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this and put it over here. Okay, and the same thing I'll do here. I'll copy the file from the target folder and move this to S3. And S3, the path of the bucket, this is the S3 service, okay, and the bucket name that we have saved in our here variable. Okay, so there is nothing but your bucket on the S3 AWS S3 service. Okay, so that is the reason why we created this. Instead of we hard coding the bucket name, we added it at the group level. That's what we're going to use it here. And the way we use it, using $symbol bucket, and I'm going to use this name as Spring Service dot jar file. So I'm renaming it here. Instead of having the snapshot, I'll just name it as Spring REST Service dot jar. Okay, and this way you can also have, you can use different versions. Whether if it is you're deploying into production, you can have a release version here, depending on which environment you are deploying it to. Okay, so I'll save this, and that's all we needed to do the deploy stage. Okay, the deploy or these two commands will do the job, but we are still missing something. How would the AWS command here know to, how would it connect to the S3 service? There needs to be some credentials or that it will use to connect to this S3 service, right? So for that, what we need to do is we need to create a user in our AWS. So for that, let's go back to our services. In this, you have something called IAM. If you scroll down, there should be something called IAM here under security, identity, and compliance. It is basically identity and management, access management. Okay, so here what we have to do is under users, add a user, and I'll call this as GitLab user, and I'm going to give this user programmatic access. Okay, so this involves, you can see that it will have access key, enables an access key ID, and secret access key. So those are the two things that you would need in your GitLab CI to connect to the service. Fine. So let's click on next, permissions. Now here what you can do is you can create your own permissions and assign it to the user. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add the existing policies. Okay, in the existing policy, I'm going to search for S3, and you can see there is something called full access for S3. So let's select that. And the other one that I want to give this user is EBS, that is Elastic Beanstalk, Elastic Beanstalk full access. Okay, so these are the two permissions that I'm going to add. Fine, so let's click on next, and the tags I will leave it as blank. I don't need it. So let's review it. So this is the user that gets created, and I'm having programmatic access and two policies, that is S3 full access and Elastic Beanstalk full access. Let's create the user. Now you can see that the credentials are generated. Okay, make sure that you save these credentials so that whenever you are trying to connect to the S3 or EBS, you can make use of this access key ID and the secret access key. And what we're going to do is we will save this in our variables. Let's do that. Let's go to our CI/CD, and here I'm going to add a variable again, and the variable name is going to be this AWS access key ID, and this is again I'm taking it from the command line interface, AWS command line interface. So let's use that, and in the value I'll use the one here. I'll copy this, put it here, and add. I'll add another variable. It's going to be AWS secret access key, and the value is going to be this. Perfect. So let's add this variable. So now we have added all the three variables related to our AWS. So now what is going to happen is whenever this deploy task runs, okay, this command will automatically search, this service AWS will search for the variable, the credential variables that we just added, okay, these two variables, and if they are present, then it's going to make use of those credentials and try to connect to the S3 service. Okay, so let's push these changes to the GitLab and see that if this artifact gets deployed to our S3 service here. So if you go back, so we can close this because we saved these credentials. Now if you go back to our S3 and see that currently we won't be having anything here because the bucket is empty. Okay, there is nothing here right now, 0 objects. So let's push this and try to run the pipeline. And we have, okay, let's push this here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this as deploy changes. Let's commit and push. Let's go to our project. Under pipelines. Okay, it says invalid YML error. Okay, so let's look at this. Okay, I noticed that there is some error here in our pipeline. I have added the script under image. Basically, it should be here. Okay, it should be directly under deploy. And also, in case if you're if you are seeing this YML syntax error, there is an option in your GitLab where it says you can test your GitLab YML file in CI lint, and if you copy entire file, whatever you have, into this will basically tell you whether if it is a valid YML or not. So in case if you are, this was what we had, so if you validate, it says you the same error that you cannot have a script keyword. Okay, so that was the error. Let's fix that and redeploy it. Fix. Let's go back here and look at the pipeline. So now this is running. We have 2 tests running, code coverage and unit test. The next we have build and the deploy. So I'll pause the video here, and once this is done, I'll come back. Okay, it looks like our deploy job failed. Let's look at the console. And you can see that it says job failed, exit 252. Let's scroll up and see the log, and it says usage AWS. Okay, so there is something that argument command invalid choice, valid choices are. Okay, so let's try one thing. Let's go back to our YML file and let's override the entry point, the one that we were discussing at the start of the session. Instead of we having this this one here, the entry point, we will override this and see if it works. Okay, and the image entry point, okay, let's save this. And push it. Okay, so that's the pipeline. Okay, the pipeline is running. Let's see if this time the deploy job gets successful. Okay, so looks like a deploy job failed again. Let's look at the logs. And this time it says upload failed, invalid bucket name empty. So though we have the bucket name specified in our job, but it still shows empty. That means the variables are not being picked up. Okay, let's look at the variable settings that we added in our groups. In our CI CD, expand. And if you look at this, it says environment variables are configured by your administrator to be protected by default. So what that means is if you click on protected, it says that, okay, let's go back again here one more time. Let's expand. And it says these variables, okay, all these variables when we created, it says flags protect variable. That means export variables to pipelines running on protected branches and tags only. So what that means is this variable will be exported to the pipeline only to the protected branches. So currently we are trying to deploy to our develop branch. If you notice that we are pushing it to the develop branch, and develop branch is not set up as a protected one, right? So in that case, these variables that we created, all the variables, they are all protected variables, and will be pushed to the pipeline only if the branch is protected. And currently we don't have the develop test branches configured as protected. We only have the default branch, that is master, which is protected. Okay, so let's uncheck this for now to just make our branch, our job complete successfully, and we'll come back and later we can make this protected when we configure our branches as protected. Okay, we'll do that in our future session, but for now let's uncheck this and update the variables. And this is something is not recommended, but what we could have done is all our branches that we created, we could have made them as protected. So, but it's good that you can also figure out the issues and fix them, as we see in our when we miss some configurations, right? So with all this configuration, now we don't have this protected flag checked. So let's rerun our pipeline. We can go to our project, and what we can do is here we can just retrieve the build, that is, we retrieve the deploy job, and let's see. Okay, this time the job was successful, and you can see that upload is also successful from a target to the S3 bucket, right? So let's go to our S3 bucket here and refresh, and you can see that the file got successfully uploaded to our S3 bucket, and it is of this size. So this was our first task to upload the file to the S3 bucket. In our next session, we'll see how to deploy this artifact to the EBS. Okay, so that's all for this video. I'll see you in the next session. Till then, take care. Thank you.